when I watch something that moves me emotionally. After it's over, I usually pause and I go back and I watch it again. And I'm like, what did they do? Ah, okay, I see. Oh, that's why. It's amazing how a well-crafted scene can move people emotionally. And that's the power of storytelling, when you are able to move the audience in an emotional way.
Hello and welcome to the Ronny Leber Show, where every week we bring you fascinating guests with inspiring stories of success and overcoming obstacles from the worlds of sports, business, and entertainment. To support this channel, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and hit the like button so that we can deliver you the best content possible.
He grew up in Hollywood, California, and he has been in the entertainment industry since he was 5 years old. He inherited the entertainment genes because his mom was an actress. She was seen on The Twilight Zone and also in Get Smart, and his dad, an award-winning TV director, for example, for The Brady Bunch or I Dream of Jeannie. From becoming an actor himself, he transitioned to becoming a master storyteller. He currently has a program called Powerful Video, helping business owners to get clients with video and strategic storytelling. And I'm happy to have him on the show to dive into this deeply today for you, live from Hollywood, California. Please welcome, here is James Cooper. Woo!
Thank you, Ronny. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you here. I'm happy to have you on the show. And when you're listening to where you are in life right now and to your journey also, what comes to mind to you?
Well, I mean, you never really, when you look back, you don't expect the journey that you've had. It's always been unexpected turns along the way. I basically grew up in Hollywood my whole life. My dad got me my very first camera when I was 5 years old. I actually this is the camera. This is the actual camera that my dad got me when I was 5. It doesn't work anymore, but I still have it. And he basically—
It's real. It's not a toy.
It's not a toy. No. He basically taught me how to load film in the camera, and he said, "Go have fun." And he basically gave me that, and that started my journey. And through acting, and later on, I got into filmmaking and writing and producing small short films, and then it turned into casting. I was acting. I was in a commercial. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, listen, we need somebody to run camera for the auditions for this commercial tomorrow. Can you help?" And since I knew how to use a camera, I said, "Sure." And then the next day they said, "You're great. Can you come tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." And then it's like, "Oh, can we book you for the whole week?" And I said, "Sure." And then 7 years later, I was in casting for 7 years, auditioning actors. And that's really where my love of marketing came into play, because with commercials, you have 30-second stories to market a product or service. And I became fascinated with commercials. Even at a young age, I already was, but that kind of turned me, and it was the first time I linked storytelling to marketing. And now I work with business owners and help them tell their business story, sometimes in a short—
Before we get into that, because we're going to get into all of that. Like we gotta, don't take it all away in the beginning.
I won't. We have time.
Yeah. Let's stay with when you actually said you transitioned or first of all, no, let's go a step back.
Sure.
As a kid, you said with 5 years old, you got your first camera.
Yeah.
So what was your dream become like as a kid? Because obviously you were already you had it laid out in front of you, the entertainment industry, because of your mom and dad. Was it something that you always wanted to do? Like, I want to become a Hollywood star, or what was it like for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever thought about I wanted to be a star or anything like that, but it was just, when you're in that environment, it's just normal, a kid whose dad is a mechanic, you hang out under the car, and, it just becomes normal life for you. And so getting picked up from school and taken to the studio where I could watch my dad work was always just a normal everyday part of the routine. I would get picked up from school, and then I would do my homework in the back studio. And then when I was done, I would sit in my dad's director's chair and I would watch him work and watch him direct and coach actors. But I was always fascinated with what was going on around the actors. So I was watching my dad, but I was always watching the cameraman. I was watching the lighting people. I was fascinated with all the behind the scenes thing that you didn't see in the camera, right? So it's like the microphone is here, but I was fascinated. It was out of frame. I couldn't see it in the monitor, but I saw all the people with all the different tools that made the show happen. And that was much more interesting to me, is the making of the show. And so that, yeah. And so my dad I never went to film school, but my dad, whenever I had questions, my dad would say, well, that's Bobby. He's the lighting designer. Why don't you go ask him? Or, that's Tom. He's the, he directs the cameras and the movement. Why don't you talk to him? And so I went to these people and I kind of asked questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? And, hopefully I wasn't too annoying, but I felt that I got an onset education on how to make films.
And that's awesome, because also I heard that Steven Spielberg, when he got into the industry, that actually he was like an intern, or he just was hanging around the studios all day, and he was just fascinated by making movies, and then he was like, hey, can I help? Like, I'll do anything just to be there, just to be in the environment.
And there's a lot of actors, a lot of famous Hollywood actors who became directors, and they did it by shadowing. They asked, when they worked with a director, whether it was that film or whether it was another film, they said, would it be okay if I shadow you? Shadowing meaning like be near them, watch them. And most directors would be open to that, especially for the stars of the films they've directed.
So you got to know, of course, also all the actors and so on. And like, so for you, you said it became normal. And of course, growing up, for that's the life that you knew. And at the same time, your dad was a TV director. Is there a big difference between TV and between movies?
Well, there is a big difference in terms of the types of TV that my dad was directing. My dad directed mostly sitcom, and sitcom back when was usually 4 cameras, multiple cameras. So you have multiple angles of the shots. And then my dad would look at the script and he knows what angles he needs. And so on certain lines, the cameras would roll and move to set up the next shot. So that basically they always filmed in front of a live audience. And this is how live TV was done, right? Live TV was done where cameras are always moving, and then the director go to camera 4. Okay, great. Let's go to camera 2. That's still the way they direct sports. When you watch sports, there's many angles of the camera to get the close-ups and the wide shots and all that stuff. And live TV, I used to work on the Oscars and the Emmy Awards, and that's all 4 cameras, multiple cameras in motion. And so that's the way that you do that type of show. When you do films, it's usually 1 camera. It's 1 camera at a time. And you've seen those famous cranes where the director is sitting up on the top and the camera is moving down and things like that. That's usually a 1 camera. So that's why in films they do multiple takes of the same shot from different angles, and then it's all put together in post-production and editing.
Very, very fascinating. And so at a sitcom, because oftentimes you have like all those laughters, or at least back in the day that they played in, like ha 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 ha. What was it like? Really, like for somebody who has never been to a sitcom recording, and who is probably the most of the people, including me, is it like really the live laughter, or you just put in some laughter, or how is that?
Both. Both. Yeah, I've seen a lot of bad shows, and you can tell when it's canned. They call it canned, pre-recorded audience laughter. Yeah, those usually are not in front of a live audience. But a lot of those shows that my dad directed, we had a live audience there, and they would record audience reaction and use those laughs to be on the moments that they actually laughed.
And then you usually have always at the end one guy who's still like, ah!
Yeah. Sometimes you have to find ways to cut and do stuff like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Somebody who comes in. So, all right. So you already mentioned your first learnings, and then you grew up, and your first steps into the industry was acting, or what was that?
Yeah, my first steps at the industry was little non-verbal scenes in some of my dad's shows. Sometimes I would get a line every once in a while. That's how I got my union card. But basically, yeah, my dad would kind of put me in the background somewhere. It was fun. It was fun to be on the set. It was fun to, go through the whole process, go through makeup, have a trailer. All those little things were fun. And then that kind of, once I got my union card, because we have the SAG Screen Actors Guild, then it opened up doors for me to be able to be on other shows. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So basically, you got your. How does it work? Also, for anybody who is like dreaming of the career in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So you need this card or like the UN?
Yes. Well, now we're on strike, so the union is on strike right now. So hopefully, by the time this airs, the strike will be over. But it doesn't look like it. But there's union actors and non-union actors, and every TV show uses both, right? And so people who are considered professional actors doesn't really mean that they're, just because you have a card doesn't mean that you're a good actor or a professional actor, but it just means that you're able to work within the union. And so union jobs pay more. It's easier to get auditions in front of the bigger people, things like that. There's a lot of challenge when people first come to Los Angeles and they have no professional experience. The goal for some of them is to get on some of these shows so that they could get their union card. Because once they have your union card, it's easier to get more there's more professional jobs that are available that have lines and things like that.
Like
in the beginning,
that you've done something.
Yeah, well, you when you first come out here, I recommend just getting in anywhere that you can. There's background work and there's what's called extra work. So all the people who you see in the background that don't necessarily have lines, those are extras. They're people that have been put into crowd scenes and stuff like that. And so there's casting agencies that are just for that. And so for those jobs, people try to get a featured extra. So it's like a more prominent looking at the camera, or like, receiving something from the main character without a line, or maybe they'll throw them a line. And then when you get those, you get what is called vouchers. You get these union vouchers. So if you get a featured extra role, you can get a union voucher. And when you get 3 of them, you're able to join the union. That's one way in.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating. And so what actually made a transition from acting then into storytelling?
Well, storytelling was always there because my father was a master storyteller. And so we sat at the dinner table and he would tell stories. I mean, usually stories of, work. Sometimes he would tell stories about our family. So my dad was a really, really masterful storyteller. And we used to sit down on the weekends. We used to sit down on the couch. We used to watch old movies. And he, back when we had tapes, VCR tapes, if you remember, way back when, at the end of the movie, he would always ask me what was my favorite part. And I would tell him, and then he would rewind the tape and we would look at that scene again. And he used to break down a scene piece by piece to share his perspective of what the director was doing. So it's like, oh, look at how, they're focusing in just on his face, or you see how the lighting is just on that part of his face, or you hear the music rise at that one moment. Like he would break down, kind of like the Matrix, where you see all the lines. Like he would break down what was going on in the mind of the director to get the part that I thought was my favorite part. How did that happen? And so once he started breaking things like that down for me as a kid, and how to tell stories through the lens, I was forever fascinated. And so even today, when I watch something that moves me emotionally, where I get choked up or I get really excited or I'm like on the edge of my seat, part of me is enjoying it in the moment. And then after it's over, I usually pause and I go back and I watch it again. And I'm like, what did they do? Ah, okay, I see. Oh, that's why. And so it's amazing how a well-crafted scene can move people emotionally. And that's the power of storytelling, when you are able to move the audience in an emotional way to get the effect that you want through the lighting, the sound, the visual, the acting, performance, all of it put together to create a really amazing moment. And I think that's what stories are. They're creating amazing moments that move you emotionally.
Just like breaking in this right now, because I believe that storytelling is incredibly powerful, also as you said, and everybody in the world has been in one way or another, or in many ways, been around storytelling or exposed to storytelling and to great stories. But the least or the fewest people actually know how a great story is being drafted, how it's cast, like how it's being made, because usually it's like, oh yeah, that person is a great storyteller, or like, I love when that person tells a story, but there is actually method behind it. So what makes a great story great?
Well, there's a couple things there. One is that we are natural storytellers as human beings. That's how we communicate. We communicate through stories. We might not realize it, but we're doing it every single day. I mean, right now I've told you like at least 3 or 4 or 5 stories already. When you talk to somebody that you have not talked to in a long time, and you basically say, "Hey, how are you? What's been going on with you?" The very next thing that they're going to respond with is with a story. "Oh my God, you never believe what just happened." It's like they start going into a story. That's how a story is told. We communicate through stories. It's how we connect with people, right? And so when we try to do it strategically, we forget how we normally create, how we talk. We forget how to naturally do the thing that we're doing all the time. So story crafting, right? I like breaking into story crafting and storytelling. Story crafting is the design and the intention of what it is that you want to say, and to do it strategically to get an emotional effect. So that's story. That's the pre-work, right? In our world, we call it pre-framing. We have an intention that we want the audience to have.
Like you lay the foundation, basically.
Yeah. We want to know what the ending is, so we stick the landing. We have a target. This is what I want my audience to feel. This is what I want my audience to understand. This is what my intention is, why I'm telling this story. Just like you would write a term paper for college. What is what's the thesis? What is it you believe? What is it that you want the audience to understand? And when you have that intention, then it's a matter of landing there to get there. And so story crafting is really where all the work goes in. And then storytelling is really about the delivery of it. How well can you communicate your intention? How well can you deliver on the promise that you're giving your audience? So when it comes, if we go back to basics and we chunk up to like the simplest idea, most stories are broken up into 3 acts, 3 separate sections. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a first act, second act, third act. And that's because our brain is wired for the number 3. It's just something in our DNA where we love 3s. We love the imbalance. There's a desire to have this teeter-totter effect, which takes us on a ride. I mean, this is getting very into philosophy, but people who say they want balance, they don't want balance. They want balance for the moment, and then they have it, and then they want unbalance. They need to not feel bored. So when we take people on a journey, Act 1 is all about conflict. That's really what stories are. The goal of a story is to create or share conflict and then resolve that conflict. And so in the very first act, Act 1, if you think of any movie, we know within the
Let's take an example that many people know.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at Star Wars as the most basic hero's journey, we're thrown into conflict right away, and we understand who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, right? We see Princess Leia and the robots and R2-D2, and we see Vader, and we understand right away that there's a war going on. So if you look at the hero's journey, which is one of the most classic story models, in the very beginning, we have to have something that the main character wants and something in the way, something preventing them from getting it. And so once we establish that, when we establish, okay, we understand, who's the hero in the story, and we're introduced to like Luke Skywalker, right? So Luke Skywalker has a very simple conflict. He wants to travel the stars. He wants to get away. He wants to be with his friends at the academy, but he can't. Why? Because his uncle says he has to work the farm. He can't leave. Maybe next year.
The harvest is coming.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
Of course, the new harvest is coming.
Yeah, the harvest is coming. And immediately, even in a crazy, fantastical world with talking robots and monsters, we have a simple situation that we're able to understand. We've all been in a job that we hate. We've all known what it feels like to be trapped, to want to do something, but we can't. And so we immediately associate and connect with what called the protagonist, the main character, the character that we put ourselves in their shoes. And so we establish what that conflict is, and then all of a sudden he's thrust into this big war, and we move on to Act 2, where he steps into learning about the Force, saving the princess, going on this amazing journey.
So basically, Act 1 is laying the foundation. It's like, this is the premises, this is where we're at. Like, it's basically where we are, and then there's something's changing. Something's changing, and that actually takes us on the roller coaster.
It does.
Step 1 is basically like you go to the ride, you're lining up, you're figuring out everything, then you step onto the roller coaster, it starts, and suddenly, boom, you're on the move, and that's Act 2, right?
Yes. Act 2 is when you start going on the ride. Yeah. We have a hook, something that pulls us in Act 1, something that we can relate to, something that's exciting for us, hopefully. It depends on what kind of movie it is, obviously. But basically, the main part of Act 1 is understanding what is the desire, what is the conflict. If you don't have those two things established, the audience is lost, and we're not going to go on this ride with you.
Or Gladiator, for example. Like Gladiator, you see immediately there's this general, and he has his last battle. He won it. Victory. He just wants to go home.
He just wants to go home. That's it. That's the conflict. He wants to go home, but he's asked by Caesar to take over this huge weight of burden, but to take over, be the ruler of Rome. And it's something that he doesn't want to do, but he weighs with this decision, and then immediately, bam, Caesar is killed, and he basically is now, in this, for his life. You can't get much more conflict than death, and he escapes, and now we're on a new journey.
And that's Act 2.
Yeah, Act 2 is when the character is either thrust into or makes a conscious decision to go on a journey, to go on the quest. And so Act 2 is all about getting to the thing that you want. Usually established in Act 1, there's like the brass ring, there's the prize, or the thing that you're after, and it's the transformation at the end. So that's the whole arc of Act 2, is the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the challenges. Sometimes during Act 2, we will meet some sort of sage or a wizard or a Yoda or somebody who gives us the knowledge or the information that we need to defeat the villain. That element usually comes in some way in Act 2, where we get
Gladiator. It was, for example, the guy who trained the gladiators.
Yep, the guy who trained the gladiators, and in Star Wars, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi in the first movie. In the second movie, it's Yoda. But we get somebody who basically gives him the secret that at the very end, Luke is on that trench and he says, use the Force. And he finally realizes he doesn't need the machines, and he does it. In Gladiator, he knows towards the end that he knows that he's going to die, but he basically fulfills the quest he has of killing the young Caesar. He fulfills that quest.
But that's already Act number 3, right?
That's at the end of Act 2.
Oh, okay.
The beginning of Act 3. And sometimes Act 3 can happen really quickly. Sometimes it takes a little more time. But basically, all Act 3 is to leave the audience with a moral or a moment where they are emotionally moved. And for some, it's the prequel to the next story. It's the beginning of the next piece.
So it's all very systematic.
It is. It's structured more so than you would think, and the reason why this reason why movies are successful following this same template that most movies follow is because it works. We understand it. We establish who we want to root for. We go on this ride with them. We cheer when they win. We're sad when they lose, and we're left with some sort of emotional moment that we can relate to. That's where we decide whether this is a good movie or this was not a good movie.
And of course, and usually at the like close to the end of Act 2, there comes a point where it's like the point of no return, when basically like a make or break moment, or like, okay, like all or nothing, basically.
Yeah,
Because
the more the hero is on the brink of not succeeding, the more on the edge of our seat we are.
so, and also, of course, a great opponent makes also a great, like a great villain makes a great hero. But now, if you've listened to all of that, and you're thinking like, okay, that's awesome. Like, I understand more about storytelling now. And how does this apply to me as for example, as a business owner, or maybe even somebody who is not a business owner, but basically all of us have a story. And it's, I would say, and I'm sure you have your own take on that. The better you're able to tell stories, the more you will earn. Would you agree?
I do. I think that becoming a better communicator, becoming a better storyteller is becoming a better communicator. And leaders are great storytellers. Most leaders have the ability to understand how to, I mean, again, it depends on, there's some business leaders that have no idea how to tell stories. It doesn't mean they're bad business leaders, but we remember great speeches. We remember how, if somebody's on stage and they tell a story and it moves us emotionally, we remember it. And so I've been to lots and lots of events and seminars, maybe you have too. And when you have multiple speakers that have gone on stage, it's usually the ones that told you a story that you remember. And it's like Maya Angelou has that great quote. People will most likely forget what you said and what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And stories are the best tool that I've ever known to be able to move an audience emotionally. And the reason why is that when people tell stories, there's something that happens in their brain that lets their guard down, and they don't feel judged. They make their own judgments themselves, but they don't, like, if you're telling somebody this is what you need to believe, they're going to put up their guard. But if you share a story of why this is important, they process it themselves and they go, okay, maybe that is what I should believe. They're moved by the story, because whenever a story is being told, your brain is constantly going, how does this story relate to me and my situation? That's the power of stories, is that it bypasses that more conscious brain and goes more to the subconscious brain. How does because one of my mentors, Bo Eason, he said, personal becomes universal. And what that means is if I want you to think about your dad, all I have to do is start talking about mine. That's it. Our brains, it's like a question. You can't ask a question without the brain trying to fill in the blank and answer that question. Same thing with stories. I can't start talking about my high school days without you start thinking of your high school days. When you tell stories, it's like the don't think of a blue elephant, don't think of a blue elephant, don't think of a blue elephant. You can't help but think of the blue elephant. Stories do that, and that's why they're so powerful.
One thing actually that I did, and maybe you have a different method, I would love to hear about that, is I actually went on Trello, or I mean, it can be any software, and I created my own story inventory. That means I actually wrote like, what are some themes that I have stories to, or that I can tell stories about, and then I wrote like, okay, this story, like can be stories about my past. But it can also be stories that I have maybe that I have experienced, or that I have heard of, that can be great. What is a great way to capture stories?
It's great. I love this question. So we remember stories every single day, sometimes without even realizing it. We might see a billboard or we hear a song and we're transported to that moment, that time. And usually when those things happen and we have those memories, I always try to capture them as much as I can in whatever detail I can. And so a lot of times I'll take out my phone and I'll just start talking. I'll do a voice memo and I'll just start talking. It's like, oh, I was just thinking about this one day. It was, I was like, I was 14 years old, and I remember this, picnic that I had, and I just start talking about that story, because if we don't capture it, it's going to be gone and we may never remember it again. We don't know, because we have so many moments that happen to us in our lifetime. If we find these moments and we can capture them when we remember them, that is a great way to capture stories, so that later on you can tell those stories strategically in your business.
Just to go into more detail.
Yeah.
So you have them on your phone. How do you organize them afterwards? And because when you actually think about that story, do you still edit them or afterwards, or do you like recraft them, or do you think about, well, how can I make this story more powerful? Do you then go still through a process, or you just like put it on your phone and then it goes where?
Yeah, storytelling is always going to be intentional. So you have to have a reason why to tell the story. Now, there are lots of different kinds of stories that you can tell, depending on what the goal is for your audience. If you're trying to attract your audience, the types of people that you want as clients, as prospects, that's a very specific goal, right? I want to tell a story that attracts my ideal clients.
So you need to know who your ideal clients is
first. That's homework that you do before storytelling. Yes, you need to know who your ideal clients are, and there's a whole process on I guide people through a process to understand who is their audience, who is their niche, and who is their avatar. It's 3 different levels, and so helping people kind of figure out who is the one person that is their ideal client. That's a whole other process. I don't know if we have time to do all that, but basically the idea is know who you're trying to attract, because the person you're trying to attract, there's a specific message you can say that will attract them. So that's the first thing. But let's say you already know, okay, I know, John Smith. I know exactly who John Smith is. I know what their problems are. I know what their desires and dreams are. I know what they want. I know how my product or service can help John Smith. He's looking for a product or service like mine. There's different levels of awareness of whether or not they understand their own problem. That's another whole conversation that we may have. But if you could just Google the 5 levels of awareness in marketing, and it walks you through. You'll see lots of models that look very similar. Are they product unaware? Are they product aware? Are they problem aware, product aware? The different levels. But let's just say,
basically, just as a like, one thing is they know exactly who you are, they know what you're selling, that they maybe are your fan, your client, are following you, that this is totally aware, or they don't even know that they have a problem, or that this exists. Basically, that's completely unaware.
Yeah, completely unaware. And those are the people. I know we're going on lots of different tangents here, but basically, people who are problem unaware are probably the worst person to go after, because if they don't know that they even have a problem, it's really hard to, not really hard, but you have to educate them first that they have a problem, and then they realize that they have a problem, and then you could say, okay, and this is my product or service that can help you with that problem. But what you would prefer to go after and connect with are people who already know that they have a problem. They step on the scale, they look in the mirror, and they don't, their body needs some help. They look at their business, they look at their cash flow, and they understand that there's a problem. So when you target people and look for people, you want to start with people who are aware that there's a problem.
The low-hanging fruit.
Oh, yeah, it's much easier to say, hey, do you have this problem? And they go, yes. They go, great, I have a solution for you. That's a much easier thing than, trying to convince people that they have a problem. Much harder to market to. But basically, when you're looking at your ideal audience or your avatar, the ideal one person that you're trying to reach, you can look at your own personal journey. This is the way that I do it with clients. I ask them, what are some of the most significant moments that got you to where you are today? Right? So we're kind of laying out our own hero's journey. And this is something that people can do whether they have a business or not. If they want to find stories, look at, in our world, we talk about significant emotional events. What are the moments that have shaped who you are? That's a deep question where you can then immediately you will know. There's usually 5 or 6 moments that will rise to the surface. Could be the death of a family member. It could be the decision to get married or to go after the person that you're in a partner with now. It could be, you know, where you decided to go to university, because those decisions affect your destiny. If you made a different decision, you would have been on a completely different path.
Yeah,
So when
you
we
got in a certain school, or you did not get into a certain school, or
yeah,
something, for example.
totally. So we look at moments that are really significant, and then again,
Once again, Michael Jordan, for example, not making varsity team as a sophomore in high school. That was totally changed the course of basketball history.
It did. Not only his history, but basketball's history, because he could have given up. He could have said, I'm not good at, like they said, I didn't make varsity. That means I must not be good enough. Let me do something else. And he thought about baseball. And if he had quit basketball completely, you know, maybe he would have been a Hall of Fame baseball player, because if he spent all his time focusing just on that. But he that event decided to push him forward to work on his game even more. So yeah, you look at moments like that, and there's always going to be a story there. Always. It's just a matter of how do you unpack it? What is the lesson that you want? And so when we know what that event is, what is the ending? What is the thing that you want your audience to walk away with? How do you want them to feel? And what is it that you want them to do? And when we understand those things, now we have a target, and now it's a matter of working back and then making sure that we land on that target. And so
now,
yeah.
So now
No,
you've identified your story.
Mm-hmm.
As a business owner, or maybe as somebody who is like, hey, who wants to create a personal brand.
Yeah.
And it can be for business reasons. It can be for whatever reasons you got.
Yep.
What is the best way to get your story out?
Yep. You mean to get your story out of you, or to get your story out in the marketplace?
Out in the marketplace.
Okay,
because
great.
I'm going to give it away, because you said, or you mentioned to me before, it's video, but why is it video?
Yeah. So if you understand your branding story, and the thing is, I like the origin story. I think that's a great story to tell, because people aren't just interested in getting the results. They're interested on who is going to help them get the results, right? One of my mentors said, people don't buy coaching, they buy coaches. So they're looking for that person to guide them. And so your origin story is like your fingerprint. Nobody else has it. Doesn't matter how many people do what you do, nobody has your story. And for that reason alone, it's one of the most valuable things you have. And that's why you should be telling it. And so people we need to get you to unpack that story. So one of the questions that I always ask, my clients and people that I work with is like, you could have done anything with your life. Why did you choose this? So when we figure out that why, that reason for that origin, how they got here, that's a very important question to ask yourself. Why am I doing this thing that I'm doing now? And then how did you get to here? What were the ups and downs, the difficulties, the challenges that got you to the success that you are today? How did you get there? So when you share your success, when you share your challenges and your success, when you share your hero's journey, what you do is you give people hope and possibility. You give people the belief that, wow, if they did it, maybe I can too. They're like, oh my God, they're just like me. Because you are your ideal client 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. They are currently where you were. And if you share your story of how you get there, you're basically laying out the path for them of how they can move forward as well. And so that is the power of an origin story. And so there's lots of different stories that you can tell. There's an origin story. There's a vision story, which is from here forward, like what you believe, what you dream of. The Martin Luther King, I have a dream speech, that's a vision story. I don't know how we're going to get there, but this is where we're going. Are you coming or not? And you get people excited and enrolled on a positive vision, a compelling future, a new identity, something that they want. And you get them excited about that. And then they go, I want to join you. I want to be there. And that's how you get people excited in a vision story. When you do Kickstarter campaigns or those GoFundMe, products that don't exist, but you got to get people excited. Like, this is what we are creating. Will you invest? Will you come in at the base level and invest in this company? And sharing the vision is how you get people to invest in a venture capitalist to invest in a program or product that doesn't exist yet. It's just a vision. So that's a vision story that you have to tell. How will the world be transformed through your product or service? So there's lots of different stories that you can tell. Once you decide what kind of story you want to tell, then you basically follow that structure. You find the moments that are emotionally moving. How did it change you? What were the things that happened along that journey that shaped who you are? And then again, what do you want to leave the audience with? You have to, before you hit record on your camera or on your smartphone, I always am asking this question: how do I want my audience to feel? Because when you want your audience to feel something, who has to feel it first?
Yourself.
You do, right? You have to feel it. So you have to get in that state of, excitement or, challenge or, courage or whatever it is that you want your audience to feel, inspired. You have to feel that. And that goes into the storytelling, the delivery on camera.
I love what you're telling, and also, I mean, and master storytellers, and of course, you just get a master by practicing, by doing more and more and more of it. And before you mentioned Martin Luther King, and that reminded me that actually he didn't even plan the "I Have a Dream" thing. Like he was in the middle of his speech, and he was out there. He had a speech laid out, and in the speech that he had laid out, there was "I Have a Dream" was not even in it. And basically, he was there, and there were hundreds of thousands of people there, and in the middle of his speech he was like, man, that ain't working what I'm doing here. So yeah. I gotta pivot. And so then he just went to his heart. He went from his head to his heart and just brought his story out. And that's how he came up with "I Have a Dream." And it was impromptu.
It was, and it was one of the most and it's still to this day one of the most iconic speeches that we have in history.
Amazing. James, also, what you do is you help people get their story out, to be their authentic selves, to be themselves, and also that there's only one you that you can be. How do you help people do that?
Yeah. So basically, we do like an audit of your business and figure out like who's your ideal audience, who is it that you're trying to reach. And then we figure out the what. What is the thing that you're offering them? What is it that you're trying to sell them? What is it, the product or service that you're offering? So we have to really get clear about the who and the what. Most people are not clear on those two things, even though they may have been in business for many years. There's always another level of understanding your ideal audience and understanding what is your irresistible offer. What is the thing that you're going to be offering that ideal client? So that's the first thing we do. We figure out who is your audience and what is your offer. How can we make it more irresistible? Once we figure that, then we figure out what is the message that we need to tell to get that ideal person wanting to buy that ideal product or service.
I'm catching up.
Yes.
Irresistible offer, knowing exactly who you're delivering it to.
Yep. Yes. And so once we have that, then we figure out what is the story we need to be telling. Because if you want, and video is my favorite vehicle to transport that message. And I know for some people, video is easy. For some people, video is terrifying. I totally understand. And there are lots of different ways that you can create videos. I've helped clients that were totally scared of being on camera or uncomfortable. And there's a level of where, do we want to work on this skill of being more confident in front of the camera? Some of my clients, we work on that. We work on their delivery, their voice, their physicality, becoming more natural and authentic, because that's what people want. They want the real you. They want authenticity. Because if you're coming across as, a phony or fake or trying to manufacture an energy, it definitely reads it reads to the audience. It doesn't feel comfortable for them to watch if you're coming across as unnatural or awkward. And so we work on your delivery. But I have clients that I've made some very powerful videos telling their story with text and imagery. There are still ways to make videos where, for those people who are just absolutely terrified of being on camera, let's get started. Let's make a video sharing your voice, narrating the voice with text and imagery, and still get a similar effect. But I, for one, always like to be connected to the person whose product or service that I'm working with. So I encourage people to be on camera. And some of it is a skill that they just have naturally. Some of it is a skill that can be acquired. It just takes practice. And I help guide people to be better on camera. Just like I did with actors in casting for 7, 8 years. I'm used to being behind the camera, coaching actors and coaching non-actors to get the best delivery out of them.
Just as a nugget, what's one piece of advice that you would like that you give to somebody who is just starting out?
Yeah, I think one, be you. Everybody else is taken. Try, just be your authentic self. I know that sounds generic, but it really is the truth. People connect with people. And Simon Sinek, who's one of my favorite authors and thought leaders, he says, when you have to share your truth, share what you believe at your core, because when you do that, it attracts the types of people that you want in your business. Simon Sinek says, people don't follow you because of what you believe. They follow you because you believe the same things that they believe. And so beliefs are what really drive and connect people. And when you share your stories, you share your beliefs. When you share your stories, it tells everything about who you are and what you believe, because the choices you make of what stories you tell share your values and who you are. So that's why I encourage people to share stories, because when you share stories, it shares your values and beliefs. And those are the things that are going to attract your ideal clients, because they're going to be, ooh, I believe that too. I want to work with that person.
Wow. People like people who are like themselves, basically.
They do. Yeah.
So where can people find you? Like if somebody is out there right now watching, listening, and like, hey, I got to work with you. I got to find you. Where do you find you?
Yeah, I'm on social media at James Cooper Films. You can find me if you just go at James Cooper Films, all one word. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. I'm also on TikTok. But the main one is Instagram. If you go to Instagram and go at James Cooper Films and follow me, you can always message me. Message me the word Ronny. That way I know that you're listening to this show. And for anybody who's listening to the show who needs some help, I can do a free audit of your messaging and your story. Something that I do with clients, but for people on this show, I'll do that for free. And it's just, we'll look at your messaging, we'll look at your ideal audience, and we'll help figure out maybe some stories that we could help you tell to get more business.
I gotta ask now, out of curiosity, can you actually ever watch a movie just for enjoyment, or do you, when you go to the movie theaters and you watch a movie, is it like, how often does it come to you like, oh yeah, now he's doing this, and now, well, that shot, well, maybe I would have shot it the other way, or like how is it for you?
It's a great question. A good movie, I'm in it all the way. A good movie, I am so engrossed in the movie that usually the first time I watch it, I don't even think about those things. And that should be the goal of a movie. A goal of a movie is to keep you in it so that you don't notice things. But a movie that has weird direction, or I was watching a movie yesterday, and the sound and the score was so off of what was going on in the action that it completely took me out of the movie. Sometimes performances can take you out of the movie. And so, yeah, a bad movie, I see all the strings and everything that's going on. And it's like, ooh, I don't know why they made that choice. But good movies, I'm on the edge of my seat. I go to movies at least once or twice a week, so I'm always watching. And my kids too. I love watching movies with my kids.
That's awesome. Any last 30-second final thoughts that you want to share with our audience today?
I think, first of all, your story has incredible value. And I think people undervalue their story. They think, why would anybody want to listen to me? My story is nothing special. Your story does not have to be, I survived the Titanic story. Sometimes it's the most natural and the most common things that relate you to your audience. You grew up on a farm. Your dad was in the military. Sometimes those simple, small things are the things that are really going to connect you with your audience. So don't underestimate the value of your story, because there is nobody like you. And like I said, your story is your fingerprint. Nobody has it. And for that reason alone, it's one of the most valuable things you have to share and grow your business.
Thank you so much. That's really, really beautiful. Thank you for all the value that you provided today. Thank you for being on the show once again. Please give it up. Here's James Cooper. Woo!
Thank you so much, Ronny. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for sticking with us until the end. To make this content even more valuable for you, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts, and also share this video with somebody you care about who absolutely needs to see this. Thank you very much. Have an outstanding day and see you next time.